The Nigerian Electricity Regulatory Commission has issued the Mini-Grid Regulations 2026 aimed at improving electricity access across the country, particularly in underserved and unserved communities. The Commission disclosed this in a statement shared on its official X platform on Monday. Now, the new regulation provides a comprehensive framework for the development, operation and oversight of mini-grids with a focus on attracting investment and ensuring consumer protection. Our president of the Dangote Group, Aliko Dangote, is planning to list shares of his $20 billion oil refinery on multiple African stock exchanges in what could become a landmark cross-border public offering on the continent. According to Bloomberg, the plan was disclosed by Frank Mwiti, who is Chief Executive Officer of the Nairobi Securities Exchange, following a meeting held last week between Dangote and heads of African exchanges. In December last year, Dangote unveiled plans to list a 10% stake in his refinery on the Nigerian exchange this year. Now, our IS business analyst Chika Mbonu joins me to discuss these developments even further. Good morning, Mr. Chika. How are you today?
Abby, how are you today?
Very well, thank you. All right, well, let's begin with the one I just took. President of the Dangote Group, Aliko Dangote's plans to offer refinery shares on multiple exchanges.
Abby, before I comment on the share issue, let me put some context in the background. Before Dangote Refinery came on stream, Africa used to do something very ironic. Basically, we take our crude and sell to Europe and other countries, Middle East, and they will produce petrol, diesel, the fuels, and we'll buy back from them. That's what used to happen. And then with the coming on stream of Dangote Refinery, that has stopped. So with the first time this was happening, the first way it's happening that we were dependent on the other markets, it means that the issues of currency challenges, logistic problems, and wherever there's any problem in the Middle East or Ukraine, there's challenge in the value chain, supply chain, you find that fuel prices in Africa actually increase. And African market is massive. In a day, Africa consumes about 700 million liters of fuel daily. Petrol is 213 liters, and diesel is about 282 liters. I'm just putting perspective so you can understand what Dangote Refinery coming to Africa has done. So, and Africa used to spend about $30 billion, yearly importing fuel from the Western world. And then Dangote Refinery comes in, 650,000 barrels per day processing capacity. So Africa can now refine more, in Africa, than importing. So you can get a context that Dangote Refinery is like the refinery for Africa. And so his decision, that, his listing will be done all over Africa. You can actually link the two. Because as of now, especially with what's happening in the Middle East now, a lot of African countries are getting their petrol supplies from Dangote Refinery in Nigeria. And so listing all over Africa, is like strategic, political for him. The refinery is valued about $20 billion. It's going to do about 10%, 5 to 10%, which, the mathematics says about $5 billion. That's massive. That's massive. So the wider the takers, the better for the success of the issue. Now, I think that it's going to be more like offer for sale, which basically is he's selling down his holding, not for offer for subscription, which is more like going out to ask for new money for the company. So the money that's going to come is actually Dangote saying, I used to own 100%, but now let me own 90% and then pass on 10 to Africans. So that's very commendable. As I said, it solves a lot of strategic issues. It solves a lot of political issues because it's seen now as an African mandate, which is actually what it's already doing. But there are challenges. The challenges is include the fact that you could see that the host exchange will be, of course, NGX, Nigerian Stock Exchange. Now, it will be have the concurrent listing in North African stock exchanges, but that comes to the problem. The multiplicity of regulations. and the cross-border listings. Those are the issues that we have to they have to deal with. The issue again of currency, currency. They have already marketed this in Nigeria and said, "Oh, buy our shares and we'll pay you dividend in dollars." So a lot of people are salivating already for that, and so that's the thing. There are challenges in it. It's commendable. It's done it. It's an African solution, African project, and so let Africa celebrate in the success. That's basically what the message is. But in doing that, we must face the challenges that may come from it because of the fact that these exchanges are all listed all over Africa, and each exchange have their own regulations. So African market is very massive. It's very large. Africa requires about 4.5 million barrels a day. For processing. Dangote is making 650,000 barrels a day. So you can see that there's still opportunity for growth. Even the Dangote Refinery is also thinking of doubling their capacity.
All right. So, I mean, very smart, very strategic, but of course there are also the cons to it, which, hopefully there'll be a lot more navigable as when this comes into play. And of course, this is surely going to be a first for the continent. So, quite laudable there. Let's look next at the Nigerian Electricity Regulatory Commission's new mini-grid regulations. What are the... Okay, let's get you to start first before I even get into compliance.
Just for our viewers, so let me put something in perspective. The Nigerian electricity problem, we all know the challenges. A lot of people say it's structural because installed capacity about 13,600 megawatts. But the actual usable power is less than 5,000 megawatts, about 36%, less than that. So we have capacity on paper, really in Nigeria, but not in reality. Because one of the first things the grid is very weak. One of the things in national lexicon now is Greek collapse. Greek collapse has become has entered into a lexicon. So you have transmission bottlenecks and even gas supply issues. So then, in addition to that, millions of Nigerians, better believe it, are still not connected to the national grid. A lot of communities are not connected to the national grid, so they have zero grid access, especially in the rural communities. And so government has realized one truth, that having a national grid alone cannot solve our power problems. Having a national port. So as a now, it's like having one generator in Abuja that is powering the whole Nigeria. So government is saying now, it's okay, instead of having one generator that is powering the whole Nigeria, let every individuals, communities, estates, go and look for their own mini generators. That's really what this is pushing. So the decentralization started in 2023 when they did the Electricity Act. Now they're going to this mini grid policy to push power to the communities. So it is very, very important. So power moves closer to the people with this new initiative, and communities can hold their own mini power plants. Estates can have their own mini power plants, and in that way, the issue of national grid, load national grid is reduced, and the power cuts are reduced, and the investments, it can actually attract new investment, because that's one of the major attractions. So the communities, investors can just choose now, let's focus on Agege and work on Agege, because Agege maybe is on the national grid. Let's focus on this community in this local government, and let's focus on this estate, and new investments will come in, reduce the load on the national grid, and so that they'll have power more, especially on communities in Nigeria that don't have power.
Absolutely, rural and off-grid areas. We have just a few seconds left, actually. I want to just quickly touch on compliance requirements for operators before we go.
Yeah,
what should that be?
It's been listed that the issue, for one of the issues people have raised, is Nigeria is known for what? Policy versus execution. We are very good in paper, but the issue is, can we execute? So it's been listed, the pricing, what kind of pricing they're going to have, because usually they will know that the national grid is cheaper than off-grid mini grids. So the issue is how that the other issue has to do with how they handle conflicts with discos. So if in a community now where there's no disco and you have the mini grid, what the discos come in there, how is that going to be resolved? Of course, the issues of financial challenges, and so all those have been documented in the policy to make sure that Nigeria is not Nigeria. Nigeria is policy. But at the end of the day, how do we implement these policies?
That's very important. That's very important. So, of course, this new framework's key markers points would probably be around accelerating rural electrification and also ensuring transparency and fairness within the sector. So, hopefully, these are very well targeted. If you joined us halfway or midway, you started with, I've been chatting with Mr. Chika Mbonu, a Rice business analyst. As always, Mr. Chika, I want to thank you so much, and we'll see you again very soon.